Hey there, I'm Yankel, and today I'm going to show you how to make the absolute perfect ribeye using your cast iron pan. First thing we do, take it out of the freezer. Now, if you don't plan ahead, and I never plan ahead, there's an easy way to defrost it real quickly. So we're going to go to the sink, and we're going to put it in a bowl. We're going to run some cool water on it, and it's going to take about 15 minutes. I like to fill the bowl all the way up. Then I lower the stream to a trickle. That way water continues to flow, which is the safest way to do this. All right. While we let the steak defrost under cool running water, I'm gonna give you the 5 rules for cooking meat. Let's head over to the counter. These are my 5 go-tos when it comes to cooking meat, and I don't skip any of them. And the thing is, if you follow them, it's gonna come out great every time. So rule number 1, a good instant read thermometer. There are many brands out there. Thermopen makes a whole line. Choose one you like. This is gonna take all the guesswork out of cooking. Rule number 2, salt and pepper, and lots of it. Now, not all salts are created equal. Find a good kosher salt, one with some coarse texture, and that's what you use every time. And believe me, fresh ground pepper can make a big difference in flavor. Rule number 3, searing. Don't skip the browning process. That's where you create all the flavor. Get your cast iron pan screaming hot, let your grill preheat, let your oven heat up well, use a broiler, but whatever you do, don't skip that browning process. And rule number 4, choosing the right cooking method for the cut that you're using. Now, we have 2 basic cooking methods. There's dry direct heat and moist indirect heat. When it comes to tender cuts, like grilling steaks, dry direct heat works well. That means a sear in a pan, a grill, a broiler. And when it comes to the slow cooking methods, the tougher cuts, we're looking for moist indirect heat, like braising, steaming, and boiling. All right, now for rule number 5, and this is where it all comes together. Let your meat rest. Now that is so important for the juices to redistribute. You want to let steaks rest at least 8 minutes, and the larger the cut, the longer the resting time. All right, I think our steak is defrosted. Let's get cooking. It really takes no time at all. The cool water running over the surface defrosts it so quickly that it doesn't matter if you don't remember to plan ahead. We're ready to cook this thing, so I'm gonna head over to the counter and show you what the first step is. When it comes to cooking a perfect steak, searing is so important. And what that means for us is a dry surface. So the first thing I do is pat this steak down with some paper towel, make sure all the moisture is gone. We want browning right away, and any moisture on the surface is gonna steam. And we don't want steam, we want brown. Pat dry, nicely dried. All right, time to season, but before we do that, we're gonna preheat our pan. Now for a really good sear, without burning, we're gonna go with medium-high heat. Let's choose 7.5 on this. If you're using a gas burner, turn it all the way up and then go back a quarter turn. Electric burner, same idea. Medium-high, great temperature for searing. All right, time to season our steak. And like I said, coarse kosher salt, nice even spread. Remember, we are only seasoning the outside of the steak, so we want as much surface area covered as possible so that every bite tastes beautifully seasoned. And some coarse black pepper. Flip it over and repeat. All right. Now, when it comes to actually searing the steak, choosing the right cooking fat is important. And what we want is a fat that can do well under high heat. A refined oil works best. Unrefined, like extra virgin olive oil, it's gonna taste a little bit scorched when it gets hot enough to cook a steak. So refined oil, I'm using avocado oil. You can use a coconut oil, a peanut oil if you like the flavor of that, but as long as it's refined and good for high heat. We're gonna go right into the pan, just enough to coat the bottom. Now, while the pan heats up, we're gonna slice some garlic. One of the keys to developing flavor in a pan is basting. And what that means is after we've seared the steak, a little bit on one side, a little more on the other side, we're gonna add some butter, some garlic, and we're gonna give the steak a bath in the butter. And butter works incredibly well transferring flavor. So it's gonna actually carry the flavor of that garlic into the steak while the steak's pores are opening up from the heat. Perfect time to add tons of flavor. And of course, if you wanna add herbs at this point, or shallots or onions, that works really well too. All right, we're just looking for the oil to be moving around, a little bit of smoke, and we are good to go. That pan is hot. Steak's gonna go in. Now, when it comes to a ribeye, you can see there's a good amount of fat. And what I wanna do is make sure that fat has good contact with the pan. So I'm just gonna go around and press gently to make sure the entire steak is touching the pan. We're gonna let that sit there for exactly 2 minutes so it really builds up the crust. Don't need to move it at all. We just flipped it over. 2 minutes on the first side. After 1 minute on the second side, I'm gonna add butter and garlic to the pan and begin basting. That way I'm matching the amount of time the steak is spending on either side so we get really even cooking inside the steak. So we're looking for 1 minute. Again, making sure that I have good contact with the surface of the pan. And of course, I'm using a cast iron pan, so having a towel or an oven mitt ready to handle the pan is gonna be really helpful when it comes to not burning myself. All right, we're just about at the minute mark. So I'm actually gonna move the steak to the top of the pan. Give me plenty of room to add my butter. Butter's going in. Garlic's going in. Now you'll notice I sliced it a little bit thick. I don't want it to burn. I really just want that flavor to transfer. Now, as the butter begins to foam, we're gonna start spooning it over the steak. So I bring the butter down to me so it's easy to handle. Look at that beautiful browning that's happening. And now we start spooning it over the steak. I'm gonna do that for about a minute. All it takes is a good sear on both sides, a little bit of basting, some simmering in the pan, and that steak is done and ready to eat. Let's slice it open. But first, let it rest. All right, 115 and rising is where we want a steak for medium rare, and that's because of carryover cooking. What's gonna happen is as this steak rests, the internal temperature is actually gonna rise at least 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees, depending on how long we leave it there. So the steak is not actually gonna get any colder. It's actually gonna get hotter while it sits there. If we wanted to keep the surface hot for the 10 minutes that it's resting, we could cover it loosely with foil. So we're just gonna give that about 8 minutes to rest, let the juices redistribute. That way when we slice it open, all that moisture stays inside and you get it in every bite. Well, about 8 minutes have passed, and we're just gonna check the temperature one more time to see what happened. And you can see we're looking at plus 120, which in my opinion, for a beautiful grass-fed steak, is the perfect temperature for a medium rare. That means it's time to slice it open. Now, when it comes to slicing a ribeye, you don't need to be too concerned with the grain, although I do like to have a little bit of this strip right here in every bite. So I'm gonna go lengthwise, just like that. Give it a slice open. Oh, look at that beautiful color. Gorgeous. Juicy. As you can see, I could have let it rest a little bit longer because some of that moisture is coming out. And you know, that just goes to show you, the longer you let it rest, the better it's gonna be. One great way to do this is cook it off a little bit before you're ready to eat. Let it rest for 30 minutes, even an hour. When you're ready to eat, throw it back in the pan for a minute on each side. That's all you need to get it nice and hot, and that'll be the most juicy bite ever. All right, well, let's put that beautiful hunk of meat on the plate. Here we go. Ah, gorgeous. And of course, don't forget about all that beautiful brown butter and garlic in the pan. I think we should just spoon some of that right over the steak. Let's do that again. More garlic, more butter. If you want to get fancy, now would be the time to take that really nice sea salt someone got you as a gift and sprinkle it all over that steak. Because remember, we only seasoned the outside, so adding a little salt to the inside of the slices never hurts. Well, there you have the absolute perfect ribeye, pan-seared, basted with butter and garlic. This is what you do with the tender steaks. Do it every time, and you will never be disappointed. I'm Yankel. See you next time.